Ever since the first horror movie, The House of the Devil, horror media has been a genre that continues to explore what makes people tick and how humans understand the emotion of fear. Interestingly enough, the first horror video game was called Haunted House and played on the Magnavox Odyssey. It was overall very basic, but it was the first horror game nonetheless. What I find so interesting about this is the first two pieces of horror media and their respective platforms were based around haunted houses, which is super convenient because today I want to talk about the Cabin Factory and how I think the many haunted houses you explore in game do horror super well. Before we get into today's video, I am definitely not Cobbs. This is my second channel. On my first channel, I play primarily Ark and other survival crafters, but I like to play a lot of stuff other than Ark. I like to play a lot of horror and I like to talk about it. This is my channel where I get to talk my shit. And today, I am going to be talking about the science behind horror. One last thing, I want to say thank you to everyone who subscribed to the Patreon and made this video possible. I really appreciate your support. It means a lot to me and it allows me to do cool shit like this. All right, back to the video. Enjoy. Just as a heads up though, this is my opinion. Horror is subjective, so what I think is scary may not appeal to you in the same way. But what I will be doing is pulling in some academic research on how horror media works and how I think that applies to the way the Cabin Factory attempts to scare its players. I've been playing horror pretty consistently for a few years now, and how this game went about subverting expectations really interested me. Additionally, you do not need to have played the Cabin Factory in order to watch and understand this video. While I am using it as an example to explain a lot of these concepts, because I feel it's a great example of them, there's not prior knowledge of the game needed, and I'll try to fill in the blanks where I can. So to start, I want to explain how I'm going to be going through this. There are 3 topics of research I want to discuss: prospect and refuge, the different feelings of fear, and the ambiguity of threat theory. What I am going to do is I'm going to explain these concepts, how they are discussed in the various research pieces I found, and how we see them in the Cabin Factory. I will divide up these portions in the video notes so that there are clear timestamps on which topic will be discussed when, and I also have all of my sources included in the description for anyone that's interested in doing a little more reading. This is something I've been mulling over for a couple of weeks now, and I'm super excited to get into it. If you agree, disagree, hate everything about it, please let me know in the comments. I'm really excited to hear your guys' thoughts. Before we get started, I want to lay some groundwork on the game we are discussing today, the Cabin Factory. In the Cabin Factory, you play as a cabin inspector checking cabins to see if they are haunted or not haunted. The cabins created in the Cabin Factory are scary cabins meant for Hollywood and theme park usage. The cabins that are haunted have some form of movement in them, so when you go to inspect cabins, you have to pay close attention to each item in the cabin. Once you see something move, you are advised to get out as quickly as possible as the haunted cabins are considered dangerous. Anyways, let's begin with prospect and refuge. In McAndrew's paper titled Psychology, Geography, and Architecture of Horror, How Places Creep Us Out, McAndrew explores how humans identify creepy places, or places that elicit feelings of fear. 2 of the criteria he found that were used to judge if a location was creepy or not was prospect and refuge. Prospect refers to one's clear, unobstructed view of the landscape, while refuge means having a secure, protected place to hide where one can be sheltered from danger. He posits that attractive places offer us a lot of prospect and a lot of refuge. Landscape architect Randolph Hester refers to this as a womb with a view. A womb being considered as a safe place where we can grow and be nurtured. The view meaning, obviously, being able to see if there's any danger approaching. He supports this further by giving the example of kids playing in enclosed spaces that offer plenty of prospect and refuge. For example, cardboard boxes, tree houses, or the woods where there is lots of dense vegetation to hide in. We love the feel of these spaces because they are, evolutionarily speaking, places where you can see without being seen and eat without being eaten. Places without prospect and refuge are perceived as unsafe and dangerous because they may offer many hiding spots for people or beings that mean to do us harm. So pretty cool stuff and pretty easy to understand. It's one of those things that I feel is apparent when you think about it, but you wouldn't think about unless you sit down with a paper that's discussing it. In the Cabin Factory, you do not have prospect or refuge in the cabin layout. The first example I want to give here is the living room and kitchen hallway, and realistically, the majority of the house. When you enter the cabin in the Cabin Factory, there's a painting of a threatening-looking woman on the far right of the living room. then a narrow hallway leading to the upstairs of the house. You'll need to go down this long hallway to the stairwell in order to properly inspect the house. At the end of this hallway near the stairwell, you will need, in order to fully inspect the house, there is a man sitting at the kitchen table. Prospect-wise, you have to turn your back to the painting of the woman, a potential predator, in order to progress through the house. Additionally, when you go to leave the house after checking on the child in the upstairs attic, you have to turn your back to the other potential predator, the father. There's also something to be said on turning your back to the child, Hans, when going downstairs, but oftentimes he is not shown to be malicious towards the player, so I don't really count him. Regardless, there are several points in the house where you are not able to see what the potential predators are doing, thus offering low prospect, if not zero prospect, to the player. Additionally, there is never a point in the house where you are hidden from the occupants of the house, meaning absolutely no refuge. If you're upstairs, you are in sight of the father and Hans. In the hallway, you are in line of sight of the mother and the father. In the living room, you are in sight of the mother. The only potentially refuge-like place is the entry doorway. Unfortunately, you cannot complete the objective of the game from the front doorway, so you were forced into the low prospect and low refuge house. The lack of prospect is best displayed by the mother painting cabin. In this cabin variant, you go upstairs to check the child, and when you go downstairs, you see the mother is now standing in front of the painting rather than just being in the painting. When you go to leave, she immediately moves to block your escape. When you turn your back on her, you never know what she will do or where she will be when you go to leave the house. In my opinion, this is why she's the most terrifying for me of the two parents. When you walk through the house normally, you have your back turned to her for what feels like 90% of the time, making her very unpredictable. Also, she just looks the meanest. The dad is obviously, not the best looking either, but the way she stares out and watches the player is just horrifying. And I've never been so creeped out by her grinning variant. She's the worst part of the cabin to me. But that is Prospect and Refuge. Now that we've wrapped up our discussion of Prospect and Refuge, I want to move on to the different feelings of fear. These different feelings are not as well documented and researched as Prospect and Refuge are, but I did find them useful in explaining why the Cabin Factory spooked me to the degree it did. McAndrews posits that there are 3 different emotions and stages when it comes to horror: fear, horror, and being creeped out. He describes getting creeped out as a state of heightened vigilance as a result of ambiguity in our immediate surroundings. It's the sensation of not knowing whether there is an actual danger or threat, and an urgency to resolve said ambiguity. Horror is the growing awareness that we are facing some sort of danger, although we may not 100% understand the status of the threat or how to deal with it. Fear is the easiest to recognize of the 3. We feel fear when we clearly recognize the nature of the danger that we face. In the Cabin Factory, you either get a cabin that is haunted, or you get a cabin that is not haunted. Sometimes the cabin has horrifying imagery, but is not quote-unquote haunted due to a lack of movement. Sometimes the cabin appears normal, but has slight movements that solidify its haunted status. Other times, the movements are big and threatening, and you are chased out of the house. There's not any point in which you know what you are going to get when you step in the cabin. This is assuming it's your first playthrough and you haven't spent hours recording footage of every single haunted cabin like me. The Cabin Factory keeps you on edge, and it never lets you get comfortable in your expectations. You are always in a state of feeling creeped out because you never know whether it is a quiet, clear cabin or a cabin that is waiting to jump scare you. It never allows you time to experience horror, the growing awareness of a threat either. That is why I think it is so successful with its scares. You go from knowing there might be a threat, but not really being sure, to 100% positive there is a threat and you need to get out. There's no warm-up or easing into it. There's no growing sensations of dread. The scares don't even have to be jump scares either. Jump scares can get your heart rate up, but what I find 10 times worse is the stomach drop when you see a figure in-game moving that indicates it is a haunted cabin. That is why I believe the scares are so effective. Although there are jump scares that are used really well, most of the scares are easy to miss if you weren't already studying every inch of this cabin as per the instructions of your employers. Unfortunately, you are studying the cabin closely, so when something moves, you notice it immediately and it freaks you out. You don't know if it's just a small movement or if the entire cabin is going to light on fire because of it. To summarize, the Cabin Factory does not let players get comfortable in their feelings of fear. It leaves players in an unknowing state of being creeped out, then catapults them into a state of fear, which is why its scare sequences are so good. Lastly, I want to discuss the ambiguity of threat theory. This relates heavily to the feeling of being creeped out that we just discussed, but I think it deserves its own portion because I believe the ambiguity of threat theory is in large part of why the Cabin Factory is so successful with its scares. So, after surveying 1,300 individuals online, researchers found evidence consistent with the idea that feeling creeped out is a response to the ambiguity of threat, or the idea there may be a threat but you just don't know. We get creeped out by people when they act in unpredictable ways, violating the social conventions we understand. It makes it difficult for us to understand their intentions, and difficult to predict their behavior. To summarize, when we are presented with ambiguity, we get uncomfortable. In the Cabin Factory, you can get a spooky but not haunted cabin, or you can get a spooky and haunted cabin. The game subverts the player's expectations by never letting them get comfortable in what to expect from the cabin. Once the player starts to get comfortable in the routine of checking downstairs and checking upstairs, the game will hit you with a jump scare, or one of the parents will come to life and chase you out of the house, or out of reality. I find that once I've spent an hour or two with a horror game, it loses the initial scare factor. Once I understand the expectations the game has for me, I stop getting scared by it. Sure, there are still jump scares, but I am not constantly wary of my surroundings the way I am in the Cabin Factory. Oftentimes, I feel horror games rely too much on making the player feel powerless and out of control, and not enough on subverting the expectations the players have. The minute a player gets comfortable with the rules of the game, it becomes less scary because we understand it and we know what we need to do to beat it. The only scary thing becomes losing progress. The Cabin Factory has scares that are non-lethal and scares that are lethal, and will cause a restart. It also has cabins that have horrifying imagery but are not haunted, and it has cabins that appear normal but will switch up in an instant. I know I sound like a broken record here, but the Cabin Factory is unpredictable, which keeps players on edge, and more importantly, it keeps them scared because they don't know what they're going to get. Outlast is a game I reference a lot because I think it's a cool game. But after your first couple hours of Outlast, you know damn well that the giant residents of this insane asylum are coming to kill you or do unmentionable things to you. There is no questioning what they're there for. And when they're running at you, there's no question of what is going to happen if they catch you. And granted, a lot of the chase sequences are very stressful. It puts a lot of stress on the player, and they're done really well, so I'm not knocking Outlast. But for me, after the first couple hours of Outlast, I get used to it. I get comfortable with it. It's that comfortability that allows me to progress through the game and eventually beat it. The Cabin Factory doesn't let you get comfortable. The Cabin Factory never lets you feel comfortable, which is why I think it's really cool and why I think more people should play it if they are fans of horror. Anyways, that is all I have for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to this point in the video, please consider giving a like and subscribe. It will mean a lot to me and it will mean a lot to the YouTube algorithm. If you're interested in seeing more content like this, please let me know. This was a little different than my normal stuff, but I had a lot of fun. And I got to be a little bit of a nerd, which is always a plus. And if anyone has another horror game they really like that they would like to see something like this done on, please let me know. I am open to suggestions. Anyways, thank you again, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.